What transpired behind closed doors that caused her to lose her temper? Is this a cry for assistance or the outcome of something more serious? After hearing this, everything you believe to be true about her will be altered. Hold on, because this is terrible in addition to shocking. Everything started out quietly. There was no warning, no news story. Instead, when an audio clip began to become viral online, a creeping wave of suspicion began to spread. At first, many were unaware of what they were hearing. Is Joni Lamb actually there? The same woman who had spent years teaching about honesty, grace, and faith. As more clicked play, surprise gave way to shock. Even though she didn't sound like herself, it was her. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing content. And hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Now, back to the topic. What we were talking about was. She spoke in a strong, defensive, and indignant tone. The serene, attractive woman that people had become accustomed to was unlike anyone else. That video became viral in a matter of hours. Many folks asked questions they never would have thought to ask. How was Joni able to escape? What was she concealing? Worse yet, had she been lying all along? Neither the widow who once cried down on air while discussing Marcus nor the kind lady who held hands with calling people who were depressed were on that recording of Joni. It was someone else, not me. Someone who seems more interested in controlling others than showing compassion. That individual raised serious red flags in addition to raising her voice. The situation rapidly deteriorated. Many people who had previously donated to Daystar without giving it much thought began to stop. In an attempt to discover what hints they had missed, people began rewatching earlier shows. The more they searched, the more disturbing facts they discovered. 2 pricey homes, parties, and shopping excursions that had little to do with ministry. The identical gifts intended to aid in the gospel's dissemination were used to fund each of them. For a long time, Joni was regarded as Daystar's soulmate and the one who continued Marcus's legacy after his passing. But suddenly that image appeared to have transformed. Long before anyone knew, perhaps. Behind the prayers and the camera lights, people were starting to realize that there was more going on. Few reported feeling like giving up. Some claimed to have believed they had been blind. But notwithstanding, one thing was certain. There was more than one record that contributed to Joni Lamb's decline in popularity. It concerned the discrepancy between who she claimed to be and who she had turned into. Once that breach was revealed, things would never be the same. The first step was a real estate listing. Easy to notice, silent, and unassuming. When a house was listed for sale, it initially appeared to be just another one. However, when Poppy House was put to the advertisement and people realized what it was, everything changed. There was nothing like this house. It came to Mark Lamb in a dream. He had placed all of his heart in a safe place. Anything that was intended to endure and benefit others after he passed away. Now it was for sale. Daystar residents were offended and shocked. The Poppy House was more than just a project. It was sacred. Marcus had discussed it live, prayed over it with visitors, and even expressed his hope that it would develop into a healing space for burned-out pastors and ministry leaders. He intended it to be a secure location where individuals might go to unwind and find a break from the demands of ministry. Rest and recuperate. The sale seemed like giving up on them because of this. Jonathan Lamb signed the paperwork. Joni was with Marcus when he came up with the idea for the house. It was the same Joni who had promised to continue his efforts. She wasn't saying anything anymore, just letting things go. The quiet would have drowned out whatever she uttered. And it was known. The price of the house was $1,650,000. However, it did sell for $1,250,000. It's a significant decline, particularly for something of such significance. However, money wasn't the only factor. It concerned its meaning. Some said Joni was grieving because she couldn't bear to keep anything that made her think of Marcus so much. Some were uncertain about the money, the control, or the new direction for the ministry, but they questioned, Why would Jones sell it so soon after Marcus died? Why rush? Why not protect the dream he held so close? Joni's new partner, Doug Weiss, was in the thick of things. His name was coming up more and more, and not necessarily in a positive way. Those who are close to the ministry thought they were the focus of the sale. It was more than just land. It was about the gradual concealment of Marcus's name. The Poppy House embodied everything Marcus stood for. Rest, healing, and shame were all gone now. Like it was simply another asset to sell, it was sold off as though it didn't matter. One of the few courageous people who spoke up was Denise Boggs, a longtime family friend and teacher. She had contributed to the current state of the Poppy House. She was devastated to learn that it was being sold because she genuinely believed in it. She pleaded with Joni not to do it in private conversations. She explained the meaning of the house to Joni, but she refused to listen. They had already decided on that. And their romance ended abruptly when Denise resisted even more. Some believe that by selling the Poppy House, Joni changed the plot. They see it as a fresh start that freed her from constantly thinking about Marcus and allowed her to go on with Doug. Some believe the rapid sale was an attempt to address the ministry's poor financial situation and that it was motivated by money. However, whatever the cause, the harm was done. The ministry supporters were quite depressed. They had believed in the project, donated funds, and prayed for it, but they were now unsure if any of that had really made a difference. Was it all rhetoric and a good tale for the cameras, or had Joni's feelings truly altered after Marcus's passing? Then came the more detailed inquiries. She wanted to give up what else? If she were able to sell the Poppy House, what would she do next? Answers were hard to come by. Joni remained silent. Her social media posts grew less intimate and more structured. There was no explanation, no mention of the house. There was silence, Bible verses, and joyful pictures. In the ministry, the invisible was also evolving. The previous employees were quietly let go. Many of the new hires appeared to be unaware of or uninterested in Marcus's initial goal. The change was obvious to longtime admirers. It was more pleasant. Something had changed and no one was prepared to express it, so it felt less intimate. The sale of the Poppy House had been discussed prior to Marcus's death, according to later insiders, and some board members believed the project was not a good idea because it would be too costly, difficult to scale, or not strategic. But Marcus had battled to keep it alive. It was the labor of his life. And Joni had the final say because he wasn't present to defend it. That's why it was so painful. Since they were selling more than simply a home. It contained a part of Marcus's heart, a promise, and a hope. It served as a wake-up call for ministry believers. The cracks were no longer concealed. They were quite transparent. The selling of the Poppy House was only the beginning. Nobody is certain what caused it to this day. What was determined? Joni didn't fully respond. The ministry's ambiguous comments on managing resources and changing priorities didn't make sense. People were curious about the truth. Not public relations. Perhaps it is the true tragedy. Not only was the Poppy House sold, but no mention was made of the folks who truly cared about it. No one was held accountable or given an opportunity to explain the decision, which was taken behind closed doors. In private, Joni relinquished everything Marcus had lovingly constructed. The weight of that quiet still weighs on some people who believed the Poppy House would be a beacon in the dark. It became a symbol of all that was wrong, unfulfilled promises, abandoned legacies, and a ministry that no longer looked like it did. Similar to the one Marcus had envisioned. It developed as a friendship built on years of ministry, trust, and similar beliefs. Denise Boggs and Joni Lamb were more than simply casual friends or co-workers. Their religion was the same. They supported one another during good times and bad, worked on Daystar together, and prayed together. Denise had been one of Joni's best friends and Marcus Lamb's confidant for many years. When things got difficult, Denise was frequently the one who kept everything together in the background. Over time, however, things altered. Following Marcus's passing, things began to shift gradually before abruptly. Joni had lost a loved one. That much was obvious. Everyone was astonished by what transpired next, though. The decisions she made, the individuals she spent time with, particularly Doug Weiss, and how fast she moved on. Like many others close to the ministry, Denise made an effort to exercise patience. She didn't say anything, prayed for Joni, and gave her space when Joni first started dating Doug. However, the more time Denise spent with him, the more concerned she got. Doug and Marcus had nothing in common. Marcus had remained composed, introspective, and grounded in his preaching. Denise claimed that Doug was manipulative and that he appeared to be vocal. She could tell because of his boasts about being a leader, his rapid decision-making, and Joni's adamant defense of him against any criticism. Denise was uncertain not only about the connection but also about the implications for Daystar's future. She acted as a true friend would. She raised her voice. Denise opened up the discussion in a kind manner. Although she wanted Joni to be happy and cared for her, she advised her to relax and consider Doug's role in both her personal and ministry life. Joni was upset about it. She even abruptly ended the chat. Joni appeared to conclude that Denise was the enemy if she shown any hesitation. It was tense when they met again. They used to be friendly, but now all they do is grin, talk in short bursts, and leave awkward silences. Denise was in great pain. She had supported Joni during difficult times in her own life and had been friends with her for years. However, she was now being disregarded. In a private meeting intended to clarify matters, the final blow was administered. Denise arrived prepared to engage in frank discussion. Two women who formerly trusted one another. However, rather than having a heart-to-heart, Denise collided into a wall. Joni sat across from her, harsh, defensive, and averting her gaze. Denise became agitated at the idea of Doug's influence, and Joni snapped. She accused her of being judgmental, unkind, and unintelligent. They didn't see each other again after that. Then everything fell apart in an instant. Denise was discreetly removed from crucial discussions. Internal memos no longer included her name. Many who had been employed there for a long time saw the shift and discussed the falling out. Denise did not defend herself in public. She had no intention of stirring up controversy. All she wanted was for Joni to see what was happening. However, it wasn't Denise that Joni had chosen. The friendship that terminated wasn't the only one. It was shocking to the ministry. People started to notice other differences. More often, Joni took the lead. Previously, the entire team made decisions. Now, the boss sent them. Marcus would never have permitted Doug to attend meetings, speak on behalf of the ministry, or make calls. It had been decades since anyone had seen the Daystar. When Denise went and nobody spoke, things became worse. Speculation occupied the vacant room. According to some, Denise was expelled for confronting Joni. Others believed that she departed on her own initiative since she didn't like the direction things were taking. Joni never discussed it in public, and there was never an official announcement. Hurt and outraged, however, Denise at last began to speak privately with ministry leaders she still trusted in small groups and behind closed doors. She spoke of Joni's transformation. About how Joni appeared to become more protective and harder when Doug was around, and how ego, wealth, and power were gradually taking the place of the ministry's ideals. Joni was not intentionally harmed by Denise. She couldn't pretend that everything was fine, even if she still loved her in a manner. Joni's close pals made disparaging remarks about Denise. She was allegedly attempting to stir up trouble. The majority of those who believed her were those who had known both women for a long time. They had witnessed the transformation firsthand. The spending, the sparkle, and the way Joni appeared to be drifting further from her origins. The sense of finality was the toughest part. It was no longer possible for women who used to stand next to one another to communicate. Preaching, late-night calls, and sharing losses had developed their bond, but now it was finished. And another element that contributed to Daystar's familial atmosphere. Despite having scars from the past, Denise moved on. However, she remained in the government in a more subdued manner. In addition to the fact that she never sought public office. In private, she continued to tell people against Joni. She didn't mean to be cruel, she genuinely believed that something was amiss and that the ministry she had been helping to develop had gone awry. She moved forward and clasped Doug's arms for Joni. As if nothing had happened, she read from the Bible and grinned for the cameras. But people did remember. Denise used to stand behind her, they recalled. They reflected on how genuine their friendship had once been. When everything broke apart, they couldn't help but worry if Joni could abandon Denise. She wanted to leave behind anything else? The gap between Denise and Joni was ultimately interpreted as evidence that a sacred bond had been shattered. Not merely a relationship, but the core of a ministry founded on honesty, love, and trust. Many others who were present will never forget when everything went wrong, despite the fact that Joni never turned around. It was a long time coming. Gradually, people started to be duped, trust was lost, and a luxurious lifestyle that didn't align with the message took over. But the signs were there for those who looked closely. The ministry began as a modest, faith-based endeavor, but as the limelight, the money, and the power grew, things began to shift. Everyone had always considered Joni Lamb to be Daystar's attractive face and the one who was reliable. She maintained a steady, confident manner while she talked about sacrifice, family, and faith. Despite her global popularity, people believed she had maintained her groundedness. That might have been the case for a while. However, once Marcus passed away, something changed. It was more than just melancholy. Joni appeared to have assumed a new position. It was a completely different woman from the one people believed they knew. At first, it was silent. The more jewelry, the better clothes, the private planes. Social media gave people clues about it, such as high-end vacations, fashionable bags, and upscale lodging, but they assumed it was due to the ministry's success. She is to blame. She's been through a lot, according to some. However, the transformation was more than simply appearances behind the scenes. Because they feel they are advancing the kingdom, thousands of people have willingly donated money to the ministry. But the ministry was now leading a lifestyle that made them feel less like God's servants and more like superstars. People started whispering inside the ministry. The meetings for the budget were different. The priorities shifted. Projects that had previously focused on spiritual healing or outreach were shelved. Money was spent on items that appeared more personal, such as private residences, gatherings for a select few, and upgrades that were only focused on the church's appearance and had little to do with mission. As she read devotionals, talked about being a good steward, and smiled for the camera, Joni maintained her immaculate appearance. In the background, the concept of stewardship was becoming perverted in ways that were difficult to comprehend. It didn't help when Doug Weiss arrived. Many people actually believed that he sped up everything. They spent more when he and Joni got serious. They arrived together, traveled together, and guided one another as a team. Additionally, Doug altered the tone by granting people less freedom and more authority. Suddenly, those who had spent decades in the ministry were excluded from key decision-making. Overly inquisitive volunteers were either fired or transferred to another assignment. Everything became more orderly, more seamless, and more difficult to examine attentively. Supporters began to take note as well. Many letters arrived. Concerned emails from donors. People were curious about the whereabouts of their money. Financial reports were never provided to several individuals who requested them. Others claimed that since they asked too many questions, Daystar banned them from their social media accounts. The money wasn't the only factor. It was about faith. Because they enjoyed the message and believed in it, people donated. They felt deceived now. However, Doug and Joni were always grinning. They posted photos from designer events, upscale resorts, and beach vacations. Many churches in smaller places closed, yet they continued to fly first class to conferences and preach about benefits. It shifted from being a ministry to more of a brand. Joni Lamb TM is a glamorous spiritual lifestyle. According to those with knowledge, the deception involved more than simply money. I experienced emotions as well. Joni concealed her melancholy behind a wall. Criticizing her decisions was viewed as callous, as if it meant failing to pay tribute to Marcus. She would weep and discuss her grief during interviews, but she would then shift the topic and use phrases like walking into a new season or moving forward in faith to explain the changes. It was shrewd. Despite the fact that her actions were becoming more and more disassociated with the principles she once advocated, she discussed them in terms of spirituality. Doug, however, didn't care to be nuanced. He established himself as the new visionary, talked authoritatively, and gave instructions to those who disagreed. However, unlike Marcus, he lacked humility and elegance. Many believed him to be a businessman rather than a religious figure. Previously the voice of reason, Joni now merely reiterated his statements, defended his actions, and pushed away those who disagreed. A few former workers began speaking in low tones and without identifying themselves. They discussed meetings where money was never discussed honestly, excessive travel expenses, and funds allocated for unfulfilled objectives. Some claimed that after voicing their concerns, they were told they were being unhelpful or problematic. Someone else claimed that they simply quit because their favorite ministry was no longer in existence. The members of the Lamb family began to distance themselves from one another. Joni lost the support of friends who had been there for decades. Recently, pastors who were frequent viewers of the network declined invites. However, nobody made a direct statement. Everyone seemed to know something wasn't right but didn't want to be the first to voice it, so there was a strange hush about it all. When Joni began selling off assets, such as the Poppy House, which Marcus had devoted a lot of time to, many people gave up. There was something more than a house there. A place where people may find healing and a fresh start was a sign. She secretly sold it for far less than its true value. Marcus' dream was not honored or given a meaningful message. All that happened was a silent sale and the beginning of a new phase in her life. A chapter that, as it progressed, discussed image management less and less. Nevertheless, Joni continued to roll the cameras, and other hosts took over. The heart was gone, yet the programming continued. People claimed to have sensed that something sacred had been taken away and that the ministry had become a machine that continuously produced material and generated revenue but lacked its former soul. People's trust was damaged by more than one scandal. It followed a pattern: performance was replacing purpose, transparency was replacing concealment, and values were being replaced by vanity. It's possible that Joni and Doug believed they were protecting the ministry by remaining in charge. However, in reality, they were merely constructing walls rather than bridges. Those who had prayed, donated, and believed began to sadly and silently go. You know, people don't just donate to ministries. They provide for others. They have faith in the individuals they trust. No amount of well-produced presentations or tearful interviews can restore that trust when it is betrayed and manipulation replaces ministry. For many, the link is broken, even though Joni may still be visible on the screen. Daystar used to have dazzling light, but today it is faint.